Blood seeps into darkness. She stands in the wreckage, knowing this is her third death. Agnes lies nearby, lifeless. She had repented, lived quietly, changed nothing. The hatred that kills her never fades. As her vision blurs, the truth settles in. This loop is punishment for her family's sins, and repentance will never be enough. Lightning splits the sky. The world resets. Resolve replaces despair. If ruin is inevitable, she will be the one to bring it. She will destroy her family and end the cycle herself. Morning light pours through tall windows. The Nobelita mansion stands calm, untouched. A maid gently wakes her. Erencia opens her eyes in her fourth life. Agnes stands at her bedside, alive and smiling, unaware of the deaths that came before. Relief and shock twist together as Erencia takes in the quiet room and the fragile peace. Time moves forward again. Then news arrives. A letter from the man tied to past tragedies. She had ignored it before. Not this time. She prepares, leaves the mansion, and steps from her carriage with a single goal: to become infamous. Inside, a man suddenly declares his love, loud and shameless, praising her looks while blushing like a fool. Disgust hardens her expression. The crowd begins to whisper, eyes turning toward the spectacle. She recognizes the opportunity. This is how her villainy begins. She takes a glass of red wine, a cold smile forming. With one sharp motion, she pours it over his head. Dark liquid runs down his hair and clothes as he sits frozen in humiliation. Gasps ripple through the hall. Erencia looks down at him without a trace of regret. Erencia calmly adds the cost of cleaning to the humiliation. Lord Stein explodes, demanding an explanation, pride shattered in front of the crowd. She meets his rage with a smirk, satisfied to earn his hatred. He lifts his hand in fury. A sharp slap cuts through the hall. Shock spreads as it becomes clear Stein was not the one who struck her. A woman stands there, trembling with fury, screaming at him instead. Stein turns pale and stumbles back in fear. Confusion flickers through Erencia as the woman breaks down, sobbing that she is engaged to Stein and was to marry him in a month. The truth sinks in. He publicly confessed to another woman while already promised. His reputation crumbles in seconds. Unable to endure the stares, he flees. Erencia braces for blame, but the woman suddenly clutches her hands in tearful gratitude, calling her a savior. She introduces herself as Victorina de Thierry and admits she knew Stein was vile but lacked the courage to end things. Erencia's bold act gave her the push she needed. Around them, the crowd turns on Stein, denouncing him while praising Erencia's decisiveness. Applause fills the hall. Erencia stands frozen, horrified that her attempt at villainy has made her look admirable. She tries to leave, claiming urgent business, but is stopped over the stained sofa. Seeing another chance to act arrogant, she throws down a handful of gold without hesitation. The staff are stunned by the amount. To Erencia, it feels like shameless excess. To everyone else, it looks like outrageous generosity. She escapes, unsettled. Even her worst behavior wins praise. She resolves to try harder. The next morning, she begins inside the mansion. She harshly criticizes the kitchen, snaps at a maid over wrinkled cuffs, and scolds back the gardener mid-chop. Each action feels cruel enough in her mind. Servants watch her pass with wide-eyed awe. When Agnes asks why she was out so early, Erencia claims she was inspecting the staff and gave them a proper scolding. Instead of fear, Agnes looks impressed. Later, Erencia writes a list of future misdeeds, determined to stay focused. Agnes peers at it with admiration, assuming it is a schedule of responsibilities. Word quietly spreads that unlike her brothers, one who harasses maids and another known for violence, Erencia personally tours the estate and involves herself in management. The staff begin to hope she will become the next head of the family. Agnes excitedly asks if she has decided to become the successor. Erencia freezes, realizing too late how badly things have been misunderstood. Praise pours in about her diligence and leadership while she stares at her list of pettyville acts. Overwhelmed, she crumples the paper and retreats to bed, deciding one misunderstanding will not matter. It matters. Later, she is summoned before her father, the Duke. He looks pleased, having already heard the news. He welcomes her decision to take over the family and announces successor training will begin immediately. The butler and Agnes watch with pride. Stunned, Erencia asks about her brothers. The Duke laughs, explaining they willingly stepped aside that very morning. The realization hits like a weight. A capable successor will only make the family stronger. That is the opposite of her goal. Erencia straightens, a new idea forming. If the family is already unstable, becoming successor will only make the eventual fall worse. She accepts her father's order to begin training, hiding her true motive behind obedience. Outside, servants stare as she ignores the carriage and approaches a horse instead. Agnes is confused, but Erencia brushes it off and mounts without hesitation. She hears whispers calling her reckless and immature and feels a flicker of satisfaction. Ruining her reputation in public is exactly what she wants. She spurs the horse forward and gallops into the city, leaving worry behind. In a crowded plaza, two men discuss the Nobelita successor. One shows little interest until a small girl bumps into him. His companion urgently reveals his status. He is the prince. The child greets him innocently, unaware of the tension in the air. The prince suddenly senses danger and pulls her back. A horse charges straight toward them. He shields the girl as the animal bears down. At the last second, Erencia jerks the reins. The horse rears and leaps over them, clearing both in a single breathless motion before slamming onto the street beyond. The girl is safe. The prince rises in fury, ready to confront the reckless rider, then stops when he sees her. Erencia stands beside her horse, composed, apologetic, checking first that the child is unharmed. She advises the guardian to watch for delayed injuries and promises compensation from the Nobelita family. Recognition flashes in his eyes. Realizing she never introduced herself, Erencia gives a proper greeting and states her name. The prince's expression turns distant and unreadable. Only then does she understand who he is. Euclid Grethelos, heir to a powerful house and an imperial figure known for standing against corruption. Everything her family represents is what he opposes. The contrast unsettles her. He is striking, far more than the man she once loved in another life, and that realization irritates her even more. Getting involved with someone like him would be a disaster. Later, alone in her study, she exhales slowly. Of all people to meet while trying to become a villain, it had to be him. Erencia pushes aside lingering thoughts and focuses on her goal. She formally introduces herself to Euclid Grethelos. He acknowledges her with brief indifference and leaves without another word. She watches him go, irritation flaring, then smiles to herself. A poor first impression suits her plans just fine. Later, during a tutoring session, a scholar lectures about an imperial agreement meant to protect weaker nations. Erencia interrupts, challenging the idea of righteousness and pointing out the hypocrisy behind power and tribute. The room stiffens at her boldness. Euclid calmly supports her argument, adding that history should be viewed objectively. The scholar, flustered and angry, cuts the lesson short. Erencia is caught off guard. She expected resistance, not agreement. As the students disperse, Euclid pauses when he notices she looks unwell. Realizing she arrived without a carriage, he offers her a ride. She hesitates but accepts. Inside the carriage, tension lingers. She studies him, struck again by how striking he is, and immediately resents the thought. A man like him, an imperial figure known for opposing corruption, stands on the opposite side of everything her family represents. Getting close would only complicate her mission. They exchange a brief, awkward conversation. He notices she had been staring during the lecture. Embarrassed, she nearly apologizes before stopping herself, forcing her tone into playful boldness instead. She teases him, turning the moment on its head. Euclid is left flushed and speechless, clearly unprepared for her unpredictability. When they arrive, she steps down from the carriage composed, hiding her racing thoughts. Back at the mansion, Agnes rushes to her in distress, scolding her for disappearing and nearly fainting at the mention of Euclid escorting her home. She explains that he is so admired that other noblewomen treat him like someone who belongs to everyone. Erencia goes still. A slow, delighted smile spreads across her face as the implication sinks in. Being seen beside a man adored by society is the perfect way to attract resentment and rumors. Euclid Grethelos is treated like untouchable territory, admired to the point of reverence. Erencia quickly understands what that means. Any woman who tries to claim someone like him would instantly become a target of envy and resentment. Agnes's panic suddenly makes perfect sense. Instead of backing away, Erencia leans in. If she clings to a man everyone adores, the backlash will be enormous. She decides to push the situation as far as possible, determined to irritate him and his family alike until public opinion turns vicious. To her, the plan feels flawless. To Agnes, it looks like madness. The next morning at breakfast, Erencia calmly announces she has found someone she intends to marry. The table falls into stunned silence. Her family demands answers, and she casually reveals the name Euclid Grethelos. Shock turns to outrage. Her father flatly refuses, anger rising fast, but Erencia reveals she has already sent a proposal letter. The realization hits too late to stop it. At the Grethelos estate, the letter arrives and is delivered to Euclid. Confusion turns to disbelief as the contents are read. The proposal is blunt, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Euclid is left staring at the page, completely thrown off by her audacity. Before he can fully process it, news comes that Erencia herself has arrived. He concludes this is less a proposal and more a challenge. Still unsettled, he goes to meet her without bothering to change into formal attire. In the drawing room, Erencia waits with perfect composure. Tea in hand, Euclid enters, cool and restrained, and dismisses the servants to speak privately. She immediately notices his casual appearance and the tension in his posture. To her, everything about him says rejection is coming. Yet even in his clear displeasure, he ensures her dignity by clearing the room. Erencia sits composed in the drawing room and asks if Euclid received her letter. He confirms and studies her in silence before questioning why she assumes she already knows his answer. She confidently expects rejection. Instead, he leans closer, voice low and steady, asking why he would refuse. The sudden closeness and intensity catch her off guard. Her heartbeat stumbles, thoughts scattering as she struggles to recover. Flustered, she argues they barely know each other and insists the idea makes no sense. He remains calm, pointing out that time and circumstance can change quickly. A major imperial banquet is only months away. His tone makes it clear he is not dismissing the idea. She stares at him stunned, asking if he is seriously considering it. He gives a small, composed smile and admits he sees no reason not to think about it. That night at the Nobelita estate, Erencia collapses face down on her bed in disbelief. Agnes is thrilled, convinced this is wonderful news, while gossip spreads among the maids that, considering it. Sounds promising. Erencia can only groan. This was supposed to earn hatred, not possibility. She replays the outcome she wanted: shameless pursuit, cold rejection, public humiliation. Instead, he did not refuse at all. The plan has veered wildly off course. The next morning, a personal invitation arrives addressed directly to her. Confused, she opens it and soon finds herself entering a sunny garden where a group of noble ladies eagerly welcome her. She expects judgment. Instead, she is met with admiration. They praise her for challenging a biased scholar, calling it brave. They admire her bold horseback riding, saying it broke suffocating social expectations. They even bring up the incident with Stein, grateful she exposed his behavior and gave another woman the courage to leave him. Erencia stands frozen as story after story paints her, villainy, as heroic defiance. The girls speak of her as someone who stands up against unfair traditions and inspires others to be bold. Then they ask if she would teach them how to be as confident and fearless as she is. Panic rises behind her polite smile. She has no idea what they think she knows. Elsewhere, at the Grethelos estate, Euclid stands alone in the garden, unsettled. He cannot understand why his composure falters whenever he thinks about her. The steady logic he prides himself on slips the moment she comes to mind. At his desk, paperwork waits untouched as his thoughts circle back to her expression, her boldness, the way she looked at him without hesitation. The unfamiliar tension in his chest refuses to fade. He tells himself it was an impulsive reaction, nothing more. Euclid sits alone in his study, unsettled by his own thoughts. An image keeps surfacing, Erencia in his arms. The idea makes no sense, and that is exactly why it disturbs him. He presses his fingers to his forehead, overwhelmed, wondering when he became someone who reacts on impulse. He tells himself the proposal conversation was a mistake, a moment of irritation that went too far. But memory betrays him. He sees again her stunned expression when he said he would consider it. The shock, the fluster, the way her composure cracked for a second. His hand drifts to his lips as reluctant amusement surfaces. That reaction lingers in his mind more than it should. He leans back, curiosity slowly replacing frustration. He wants to know what she will do next. At the Nobelita estate, Erencia is in the middle of a very different emotional spiral. Instead of despair, she is energized. The memory of the noble girls looking at her with shining admiration sparks a new idea. If they want her guidance, she will give it. Lessons on how to become proper villainesses. In her mind, it is genius. She will lead them astray, their reputations will collapse, and society will blame her for corrupting innocent ladies. A perfect chain of scandal. She eagerly calls for paper and begins writing invitations. Soon after, she hosts a tea gathering with 3 noble girls. They sit around the table with sweets and tea, notebooks ready, faces full of expectation. Erencia takes the seat of a strict mentor. She corrects their posture, their timing, their responses to social situations. She stresses that they must not be meek, that they should return coldness with coldness and never let themselves be slighted. To her, it is training in villainy. To them, it sounds like lessons in confidence and self-respect. She reminds them the upcoming royal banquet will be their testing ground. They must practice now. She calls over a handsome servant and turns the situation into role play, showing them how to refuse a dance invitation in a cutting, unforgettable way. The girls watch in awe, scribbling notes, completely inspired. Their enthusiasm only makes her more certain this will end in disaster. After the lesson, Erencia marches through the mansion with renewed determination. She has been too distracted lately. A proper villainess must constantly nitpick and intimidate. Today, she will scold the staff thoroughly. She checks the windows, spotless, the dining preparations, impeccable, the wardrobes, perfectly arranged. Even the garden hedges are trimmed into impressive shapes. The more she looks, the worse she feels. Instead of trembling servants, she finds proud workers who seem motivated, not afraid. Her earlier inspections have only improved morale. Frustration builds. Her attempts at tyranny have somehow made the household run better. Then she hears it, a faint creak from a nearby door. Her eyes light up with desperate triumph. Finally, a flaw. She immediately calls over the butler and points out the squeaking hinge as if it were a grave failure. Sebastian bows and apologizes, promising the squeaking hinge will be repaired after the guests leave. Erencia doesn't let it go. She questions how he plans to fix it and presses until he falters. Then she coldly orders proper craftsmen to be summoned, not a rushed servant patch job. Sebastian hesitates, explaining the prestigious Grey Tree Guild must be booked weeks ahead. Erencia counters without care for status and commands him to find any skilled technician, noble or commoner. Grey Tree's reputation hangs in the background, a once respected guild now bloated by monopoly and pride, still favored by nobles who refuse to trust lower workers. Erencia believes she is pushing Sebastian into humiliation by forcing him to deal with common tradesmen. Instead, he accepts calmly and admits he knows someone qualified. A rare, genuine smile appears on his face. Erencia freezes. The butler, known for his wooden expression, just smiled. Agnes quietly reveals the truth: Sebastian's grandson is a talented technician who was denied entry to Grey Tree. A successful repair here would give him recognition among nobles. What Erencia thought was cruelty has become a life-changing opportunity. Defeat crashes over her. Even this attempt at tyranny turned into kindness. Later, sunlight fills the tea room. Peace settles in, but Agnes reminds her the imperial birthday banquet is approaching. Dress, jewels, accessories, and a partner must be chosen. The word partner drags Erencia into memory. In her first life, at this same event, she met the man she married. What felt like destiny ended in blood and betrayal. The dream of love shattered into a vivid memory of death. Back in the present, her resolve hardens. This time she will choose someone flawless, someone dazzling enough that she will never look back. Her thoughts land on Euclid. Elsewhere, politics churn. The empire is deep in a succession struggle between Prince Barlos, backed by the Empress and old nobility, and Prince Graces, rising with new powers. Neutral houses are valuable prizes, and the Grethelos family stands at the center of that tension. Euclid is informed he must attend Prince Barlos's birthday banquet. Bringing a partner could be seen as a political signal, tying his family to one faction. The pressure adds to his already sour mood. Then a letter arrives. It is from Erencia Nobelita. Frederick opens it, delighted. She asks Euclid to attend the imperial banquet as her partner. A week passes with no reply. Erencia grows irritated, tempted to storm the Grethelos estate again. But the memory of Euclid's overwhelming presence makes her hesitate. Instead, she prepares for the banquet. At a luxury boutique, bright dresses are presented soft and fashionable. Erencia ignores them and chooses a dark, dramatic gown never meant to be sold. The staff panic at her villainous taste. The shop bell rings. A silver-haired man steps inside and bows. Euclid's aide has arrived. Erencia turns at the boutique entrance and freezes. Frederick stands there, then a familiar, steady voice follows. Euclid steps inside. He looks composed, almost severe, adjusting his glove as he questions his aide, until he notices her. Surprise softens his expression. Erencia, dressed in the dark gown everyone tried to stop her from choosing, stares back in shock. The room falls silent. Frederick tries to joke away the tension, gesturing at a bright frilly dress and rambling about matching colors. No one laughs. Erencia focuses only on Euclid and hesitantly asks if his appearance means he accepted her invitation. He denies the assumption, then steps closer. Calm, deliberate, he takes her gloved hand and bows over it with effortless grace. Instead of accepting her request, he turns it around, formally asking to be her escort. Heat rushes to her face. For a moment, they look every bit the perfect noble pair. The onlookers swoon at the romantic picture and quickly scatter to give them privacy. The moment the others leave, the sweetness drops. Their smiles sharpen, eyes clashing. Each knows the other was trying to control the situation. Neither intends to lose. Soon after, they arrive at the imperial palace for Prince Barlos's birthday banquet. Euclid waits at the grand staircase when Duke Novelita approaches, cool and probing. Their polite exchange carries an undercurrent of rivalry. Before it can escalate, footsteps draw their attention upward. Erencia descends. She wears a bold red velvet gown, elegant and daring, her presence impossible to ignore. Both men are struck speechless. Her father immediately objects to the revealing design, worrying about gossip, but she refuses to back down. She intends to dominate the night. Euclid can't look away, quietly stunned. The Duchess arrives and gently places a shawl over Erencia's shoulders, proud yet practical. A strained silence passes between the Duke and Duchess, hinting at tension Erencia doesn't want to deal with. She quickly takes Euclid's arm and escapes inside. In the ballroom, rumors already swirl. The Empress and Prince Barlos watch the entrance closely, aware that Euclid's attendance carries political weight. Barlos hints at future plans involving his sister, clearly expecting Euclid to become a valuable ally. Then the doors open. Erencia and Euclid enter arm in arm. Her red dress flows like liquid fire. His dark formal uniform makes him look every bit the Empire's sharpest blade. Conversations falter as every gaze turns toward them. Whispers spread. Euclid has brought a partner. And what a partner. Erencia basks in the attention, thrilled to stand out. She pulls Euclid across the hall, determined to be seen from every angle. He follows, outwardly calm, inwardly annoyed at being dragged around like decoration. But something feels off. Despite all the staring, no one approaches. Noble ladies avert their eyes, tense and uneasy. Confusion creeps in. Then a thought hits her. Are they intimidated because she arrived with Euclid? Before she can decide whether to feel triumphant or suspicious, a voice greets them formally. A palace servant approaches and respectfully informs Euclid and Erencia that the Empress wishes to see them. The crowd parts at once, buzzing with curiosity, many assuming the summons is truly for Euclid. Erencia spots the silver-haired Empress watching from a distance, eyes sharp over the rim of a wine glass. Prince Barlos greets them warmly, thanking Euclid for attending and extending smooth courtesy to Erencia. His easy charm makes it clear he is pleased by her presence. Nearby, Princess Selverina observes in silence, her expression unreadable. The Empress finally addresses Erencia, cool and cutting, implying her bold appearance must be someone else's guidance and dismissing her behavior as shallow theatrics. Instead of shrinking, Erencia lights up inside. Open hostility is exactly the kind of attention she wants. With syrupy sweetness, she cheerfully claims the dress as her own choice, then calmly announces she is starving and intends to eat. At an imperial banquet, the food is display, not sustenance. Nobles starve themselves for their silhouettes. Corsets pulled so tight they can barely breathe, let alone swallow. Eating openly is social suicide. Erencia picks up her utensils anyway. She takes a bite of steak with visible delight, savoring it without shame. Around her, tension spikes. The Empress watches, visibly irritated as Erencia continues eating like the rules simply do not apply to her. Then Euclid sits beside her and joins in without hesitation. The quiet rebellion doubles in impact. Prince Barlos watches, amused, then shrugs and calls for a plate of his own. Laughter follows, light and unbothered, as he praises the chef and begins eating too. Erencia feels her plan wobble. What was meant to make her look crude is turning into a trend. With the crown prince and Euclid both eating, no one can openly condemn her. At the head table, 4 high-ranking figures dine normally while the empress fumes in silence. Across the hall, a freckled young noblewoman named Mary watches Erencia with shining admiration. Inspired, she and her friends talk about confidence, about daring to exist without shrinking. When music begins, her friends leave to dance, encouraging her before they go. Mary is left alone near a pillar when a handsome officer approaches and asks her to dance. Flustered, she struggles to respond, but his polite smile fades quickly. His grip tightens, his tone turning mocking and entitled. He belittles her, implying she should be grateful for the attention. Humiliation burns through her. Old insecurities rise fast. But so does a memory of Erencia's fierce lessons about returning exactly what one receives. Mary steadies herself. She pulls her hand free and refuses him, voice shaking but firm. His temper snaps. He lashes out, insulting her status and spreading ugly rumors as nearby guests begin to whisper. Mary's courage falters under the stairs. Shame creeps back in. Then a familiar voice cuts through the tension. Erencia appears at her side, radiant and composed, stepping neatly between Mary and the man. With cool authority, she takes in the scene and demands to know who he is supposed to be. Mary looks at her savior, overwhelmed as the confrontation shifts. Victoria burned with outrage, loudly tearing into the noble who had humiliated Mary. Her anger gave Mary just enough courage to nod along, still shaking but no longer alone. Victoria ridiculed the man's arrogance, disgusted that he acted important for offering pity to a count's daughter. The blonde noble froze when he recognized who stood in front of him. Across the ballroom, Euclid noticed Erencia was gone. While searching, he was stopped by Princess Selvarina. Calm and composed, she tried to begin a carefully planned conversation, fully aware that being seen with him would spark rumors. Before she could get far, raised voices cut through the music. Euclid's focus snapped toward the disturbance. He ended the exchange at once and moved away, citing his partner's trouble. Whispers followed him as he left the princess behind. Back at the confrontation, the air had turned suffocating. The nobleman stared at Erencia, Baron Bran Massetti. Recognition hit her like a blade. A past life surged back, a marriage built on illusion, rotting into hatred and violence. Rain, screams, a knife, her own blood. The present blurred under the weight of memory. Fury and old terror twisted together in her chest. A hand clamped down on Massetti's shoulder. Euclid stood over him, radiating quiet menace. Massetti shrank instantly, stumbling through excuses and a rushed introduction. Euclid's cold promise to remember his name drained the color from the Baron's face. With the threat subdued, Euclid turned to Erencia, concern replacing the chill. She forced herself steady and brushed it off, even as her pulse thundered. That death belonged to another life. Right now she had a role to play. Her gaze shifted to Mary and her dress. Inspiration struck. In a sharp voice meant a wound, Erencia tore into the frills and ribbons, condemning the childish excess and gaudy display. The ballroom fell silent as she stepped forward with a table knife. Gasps rippled through the crowd. With one clean motion, she sliced away the oversized bows. Pink fabric fluttered to the floor. She stood back, expression cold, expecting tears. Instead, Victoria lit up. The dress looked refined, elegant, balanced. Mary stared down in disbelief, then up at Erencia with shining eyes. Gratitude replaced fear. They praised her taste, chattering excitedly about how much better it looked. Erencia froze, her attempt at cruelty collapsing into admiration yet again. The girls hurried off toward the dance floor, buzzing with new confidence. Left behind, Euclid watched Erencia with quiet fascination, trying to understand how chaos kept turning into devotion wherever she stepped. Erencia's nerves finally cracked once the commotion died down. She worried she had gone too far, that her act had been too harsh. Euclid shut that down immediately. In his eyes, she had done nothing wrong. He thought she had been wonderful. The praise hit her like a disaster. Inside, she spiraled. Another perfect failure. Even when she tried to be awful, people liked her more. Euclid, meanwhile, was quietly satisfied. Having her as his partner kept idle nobles away and stopped the usual marriage talk. The arrangement suited him. Her dry remark about his newfound peace only made him more amused, and he thanked her for the spectacle she had created. Then his tone shifted. He leaned closer, charm turning deliberate, and made it clear he genuinely appreciated her help. He wanted to do it again, steal attention together next time. Erencia's face burned. Her thoughts short-circuited. Using a face like that felt unfair, suspicious even. She could not decide what was more alarming, his boldness or the fact that he seemed sincere. That night, far from the palace lights, glass shattered in a darkened room. An older woman stood trembling with rage before a ruined mirror, fury spilling over the Grethelos family, the past, and now a new obstacle, Erencia Nobelita. None of this had happened in any previous turn of events, and the loss of control ate at her. The door opened. A silver-haired young woman entered and addressed her as mother. The response was instant and violent. The girl was struck, insulted, blamed for everything. Blood touched her lip, but her eyes stayed calm. Too calm. She told her mother not to worry. When things settled, she would approach Euclid herself. The smile she wore made the promise feel like a threat. Morning sunlight washed over the Nobelita estate. Erencia relaxed in the garden, savoring rare peace, until responsibility ruined it. As heir, she needed to damage the family's reputation, not lounge around. An idea sparked. A business. One guaranteed to breed resentment, especially among the powerful. Money lending. She pictured nobles drowning in debt and felt a wicked thrill. Perfect. She brought the proposal to her father. The Duke rejected it instantly. The sums nobles dealt with were beyond petty grudges, and resentment from commoners would never shake their house. Besides, lending like that skirted illegality. But if she insisted, she could try. He handed her an envelope as starting capital and warned her he would not shield her from the consequences. She accepted with bright determination, already dreaming of scandal, until she checked the contents. 500 silver coins. Not even gold. The scale crushed her instantly. How was she supposed to ruin a noble house with that? Later, she lay buried under blankets, business ambitions dead on arrival. Lending money required money. This venture was doomed before it began. A knock interrupted her despair. A visitor had arrived with a business proposal. Confused, she dragged herself up to meet him. It was Andra, the boutique owner, nearly vibrating with excitement. Demand for dresses inspired by her banquet look was exploding. People were asking for clothing under her name. She barely reacted, until opportunity clicked into place. If her name had value, she would monetize it. She asked how much he planned to pay. Negotiations turned brutal. He hesitated. She named her price 30% of net profit. He tried 10. She refused. 20. Still no. 25. She did not budge. Without her name, the trend died. He needed her more than she needed him. Defeated, he agreed. Her gloom vanished instantly. If they were doing this, they would do it properly. First step, hire a portrait artist. Branding mattered. Andre could only stare, already swept into her pace. Elsewhere, a carriage rolled through the city. Euclid sat inside, exhausted, temples aching from endless work. Then a strange rainbow glimmer caught in the window. He looked again. The light shimmered, unnatural. His companion saw nothing. Euclid stared out the carriage window, caught by a familiar figure flapping in the wind. For a moment he thought it was Erencia herself, skeletal, ethereal, until he realized it was a piece of paper. Suddenly, hundreds of rainbow-colored flyers rained from the sky. Euclid snatched one and saw a vibrant advertisement for Andre's shop, Erencia winking and pointing, the text declaring the dresses everyone was talking about, officially endorsed by Erencia Nobelita. Meanwhile, Erencia counted her silver coins, stacking them carefully. 1,230, not enough. Frustration darkened her expression. Her father's 500-coin envelope suddenly felt insulting, barely seed money for the chaos she planned. Her thoughts drifted to Euclid, his thanks at the banquet, his promise of partnership. In her imagination, he became a sparkling fountain of wealth, ready to fund her schemes. Reality hit. She asked Agnes about House Grethelos. Agnes confirmed their staggering wealth, mentioning rumors of gold mines. Erencia's mind raced with possibilities. Agnes panicked. Borrowing from Euclid now would look desperate, tragic, or worse. Erencia pictured his cold judgment, his possible distance. But a sly smile spread across her face. That distance would make her villainous plan stronger, not weaker. Days later, Erencia arrived at the Grethelos estate on horseback, sharp in a blue riding habit. Frederick, Euclid's aide, greeted her nervously, trying to stall, claiming Euclid was busy. She ignored him, spotting a fancy carriage already in the driveway. Someone had arrived before her, but she didn't care. She barged through the doors, commenting on the immaculate hallways and casually dusting a vase as startled maids watched. Frederick tried again, warning her the princess was in the drawing room. Erencia ignored him and asked if Sir Grethelos was there. Inside, tension coiled tightly. Princess Selverina sipped tea with perfect composure, while Euclid looked cornered, uneasy, stressed. The princess pressed him, urging a decision. He tried to evade, apologizing for the difficulty. Erencia's sudden, well, cut through the room. Euclid looked up, stress melting instantly into relief at her presence. He welcomed her warmly, encouraging her to come in. The princess smiled politely, noting the unexpected reunion. Erencia wondered why Selverina was even at the Grethelos estate. Euclid immediately attended to her, offering tea or coffee, then leaned in to whisper, subtly referencing the coffee incident at the banquet. Erencia blushed, torn between annoyance and surprise at his protectiveness. The princess observed carefully. Euclid laughed off the tension, and Erencia agreed awkwardly to tea. Then the princess dropped a bomb she had formally proposed to Euclid. Erencia burst into applause, but Euclid acted quickly, taking her hands to stop her. His gaze was firm, apologetic. He had failed to propose himself. Erencia froze, stunned. He turned to the princess with quiet authority, declaring his heart already belonged to Erencia and asking her to reconsider if the proposal was only imperial pressure. Erencia's mind raced. House Grethelos held immense power in the succession war. The princess's marriage would tip the scales. Euclid was using her as a shield, refusing the proposal without political fallout. She slipped smoothly into role. Sweet, possessive, clinging to Euclid's arm, she radiated affection, asking how long the marriage talks had secretly existed. Euclid answered in kind, claiming they had been private. Then she faced the princess, sweet smile masking steel. She made it clear she would not release Euclid. Not now, not ever. Inside, excitement surged. This was perfect romance, rivalry, and scandal all rolled into one. The villainess in her purred with anticipation. Euclid leaned back on the sofa, rubbing his forehead as he thanked Erencia for earlier. She calmly sipped her tea and dismissed the idea that it had been an act. He stared, confused, asking if she meant what she said. She replied that it was sincere for now, which only baffled him more. She, in turn, grew annoyed that he was acting strange after she had helped him exactly as requested. He could only think how unpredictable she was. She set her cup down and bluntly asked him for money. The request stunned him. She brightly clarified she would accept silver, gold, property, then corrected herself and said cash only. Euclid couldn't understand why a Nobelita would need funds. When he asked why, she turned away, refusing to explain and insisting he owed her a favor. Concern crept into his expression. To him, it sounded like trouble. In reality, she was panicking because she was simply broke. Elsewhere, Princess Selverina sat alone with a chessboard at sunset. Forcing a marriage would only make Erencia an enemy. Calmly, she shifted her strategy. The person she needed was not Euclid, but Erencia. The next morning at the Nobelita estate, Erencia took charge while her parents were away, determined to understand the family's affairs. A maid suddenly burst in, trembling and begging for help. Erencia hurried down the hall and stopped at an open doorway. Inside, her brother Elbers had a maid cornered, hands on her while she stood frozen in fear. Other maids shook as they explained he had forced his way in. The victim clutched her torn apron and confirmed it. Fury went cold in Erencia's eyes. She ordered everyone out. The maids fled. She told Elbers this would never happen again and that she should have handled it sooner as hair. He only scoffed. She smiled sweetly and informed him she would assign only male attendants to him from now on. Confusion turned to anger on his face. Seeing the maid's terror erased any thought of letting it slide. Elbers snapped, calling the servants family property and mocking her interference. Her hand struck his face. The slap echoed. In the drawing room, Euclid waited, noticing Erencia was late. Whispers outside mentioned the young master and the young lady stepping in again. A maid entered, visibly shaken. When he asked about Erencia, she couldn't answer. His expression darkened. Her earlier request for money and the fear in the staff formed a grim conclusion. Something in this house was hurting her. Upstairs, Elbers grabbed a heavy candlestick and swung it at her in rage. Erencia tried to dodge, but her heel caught. She fell, bracing for the hit. A hand caught the candlestick midair. Elbers froze. Erencia looked up to see Euclid standing over her, gripping the weapon, his face cold with fury. He demanded to know if this was why she needed money, to escape this trash. The tension broke into stunned confusion. Erencia blinked, then frantically tried to deny the misunderstanding before it spiraled any further. Euclid gave a grave nod, convinced he understood. Erencia tried to protest, but he cut her off and said he would pretend he had not heard anything, then calmly promised to lend her as much money as she needed. Her panic vanished, replaced with instant delight. Before she could celebrate, he suddenly dropped to one knee in the middle of the drawing room. Confused, she watched as he opened a ring box, revealing a diamond. Earnest and steady, he listed what he could offer: wealth, skill with a sword, powerful connections. Then asked her to marry him. Her face went white with horror. Behind them, Elbers still lay unconscious on the floor, completely forgotten. Far away at the country estate, the Duchess stood by a window and announced she would not return to the capital. If the children were not her concern, neither was that house. The Duke, irritated, prepared to leave alone. Servants rushed outside as he ordered the carriages readied. He informed the head maid the Duchess was unwell and staying behind. Before departing, he asked the Duchess to handle a family matter. She coldly agreed. The doors shut between them. Back at the mansion, Erencia slammed her hand on the table, demanding to know what nonsense Euclid was saying. He explained the Empress would not give up and he was cornered. When she suggested marrying the princess instead, he refused outright. She pointed out they had seemed civil before. He admitted he had searched for other options, but every path was exhausting. Then he studied her shrewdly, certain she would never help without gain. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was an engagement contract. Marriage would be too binding, he explained, but an engagement could be broken anytime. Safer, practical. She considered it fast. An engagement with him meant access to money and the perfect stage for scandal. She agreed, warning him she would make their relationship look outrageously passionate. He welcomed that idea. A week later, the Nobelita estate overflowed with gifts. Servants staggered under piles of luxury goods arriving daily from Grethelos. They whispered that Euclid must be deeply infatuated. Panic set in when the Duke's carriage suddenly arrived early. The Duke stepped out, sharp-eyed, immediately noticing the mountain of trunks. The butler nervously admitted they were gifts from Grethelos. Fury darkened his face. He ordered Erencia brought to him at once. In the library, Erencia was busy staging a scene. She circled Euclid, criticizing his neat appearance and demanding he look more disheveled. Sleeves rolled, collar loosened. Still not dramatic enough. She grabbed his shirt and tugged it open further, trying to create the image of heated romance. The closeness made her flustered, but she pushed through it. Euclid, though embarrassed, played along with a faint smile. The door suddenly flew open. Frederick rushed in, then froze at the sight. Flustered apologies tumbled out as he announced the Duke had arrived. Erencia's eyes sharpened. No time to panic. She seized Euclid's arm, spun him, and pinned him back against a bookshelf, trapping him between her arms, ready to perform the most scandalous scene of her life. Erencia leaned close, flustered but determined, urging Euclid to shut his eyes because the moment was embarrassing. Her fingers moved to his collar as if to make the staged intimacy more convincing. The library doors slammed open. Duke Nobelita stormed in, shouting her name, then stopped cold. Euclid stood near her with his shirt loosened, a clear lipstick mark staining his neck, his expression calm and unashamed. Shock twisted the Duke's face. He demanded an explanation, then sneered at Euclid's background. Euclid's gaze hardened. He pulled Erencia to his side, shielding her. The Duke ordered Erencia to apologize. Euclid stepped forward instead, voice icy, warning him to mind his words if he cared about future heirs. Rage exploded. The Duke accused Erencia of failing to control her brother's gambling debts and raised his hand to strike her. Euclid moved instantly, blocking him. The air turned heavy with pressure as Euclid faced him down, eyes burning with cold fury, and told him it was time to leave. Outside, servants trembled as the Duke finally stormed off. Inside, Erencia brushed it off, pretending it had all escalated too fast. Euclid didn't smile. He had seen the raised hand, the fear, the violence. He took her hand, voice tight, saying he couldn't ignore what he'd witnessed and insisting she leave with him. She pulled free, refusing to run. That would only fuel worse rumors. Instead, she proposed making their engagement official so neither side could back out. He hesitated, then asked why she wouldn't leave now. She admitted she wasn't prepared. He signaled his staff. Servants entered with racks of dresses and armfuls of flowers. He had already prepared for this possibility. Elsewhere, a servant informed the Duchess that Erencia had left Grethelos early that morning. The Duchess, cold and distant, decided the alliance was useless to her either way. At the imperial palace, Empress Lilier sat in her garden, bitter memories surfacing. Long ago, the crown prince had loved a Grethelos woman, and Lilier had once feared being cast aside. Old resentment flared. She crushed a rose in her hand and ordered a compliant newspaper to spread a scandal before any bond between Grethelos and another woman could take root. The next morning, a maid rushed to Erencia with a paper. The headline screamed of a secret overnight affair between Erencia and Euclid. Erencia didn't panic. Her eyes lit with excitement. A scandal was exactly what she needed. She ordered preparations to go out at once. When told she was confined to the estate, she calmly pointed to the second-floor window. Doors were unnecessary. At a shabby publishing office, Euclid sat across from a sweating editor, already certain the Empress was behind the article. He wondered how to shield Erencia from the fallout. Hoofbeats thundered outside. He glanced out the window and smiled. Moments later, the door burst open. Erencia strode in wearing riding clothes, energized and fearless. She announced they would answer gossip with something even louder, and turn the scandal into their advantage. Erencia moved fast. She asked Euclid for a reporter and learned he also knew a portrait artist. An idea sparked. Bury one scandal under a louder one. She revealed a tastefully censored but highly suggestive illustration. Euclid flushed. Agnes nearly fainted in outrage. Erencia stayed unfazed, insisting mystery was more powerful than exposure. The capital exploded with gossip. Fresh papers painted Erencia and Euclid as a couple on the brink of marriage. Compared to older palace rumors, this story felt vivid and convincing. Society latched on instantly. At the Nobelita estate, the Duke choked on his tea reading the headlines, fury shaking his hands. In the palace, Empress Lilier laughed, pleased the situation was spiraling, already plotting something even more extreme to secure control of the narrative. But the rumors mutated beyond Erencia's plan. Agnes excitedly read articles framing the romance as a symbol of freedom and defiance. Posters showed Erencia and Euclid as tragic lovers fighting oppression. Erencia was horrified. What began as calculated scandal had turned into a social movement she never intended. Frustrated, she crushed the paper and refocused on her real objective, business. Soon after, she and Euclid walked through the city arm in arm, sunlight making them look every bit the romantic leads the papers described. Onlookers swooned. Former admirers of Euclid stepped aside, convinced the pair belonged together. Behind their smiles, the conversation was purely practical. Erencia asked how long they had to keep acting. Euclid said a little longer. She shifted topics to money. His offer to fund her plans still stood. When she cautiously suggested 500 gold, he dismissed it as too little and proposed 5,000, enough to buy independence outright. She accepted, realizing he still saw her as someone needing rescue, and let him keep that belief. Their walk led into a rougher district. Buildings decayed, crowds thinned into desperation. Agnes grew uneasy. Erencia stopped near the arena, a notorious gambling ground where fortunes and lives were lost. There she approached a disheveled man lingering near the entrance. Recognition dawned in his eyes as he realized who stood before him. Arist Villains, a fallen noble, humiliated and broke. Erencia saw exactly what she needed, someone drowning in debt. She offered him money with calm certainty. Later, Agnes tearfully asked how Erencia had known he was noble. Erencia recalled seeing him at the imperial ball before his decline. Agnes believed her mistress was helping him recover. Erencia knew better. Men ruined by gambling always returned for more. She understood the arena's real role. Beneath the spectacle, it funneled vast sums of corrupt noble money. As she reviewed documents tied to the place, Agnes slowly grasped the truth with horror. This wasn't charity. Erencia was stepping into the same shadowed financial world that had enriched House Nobelita. Back at the mansion, the Duke confirmed preparations with his butler. Confidence returned to his expression. The great House Nobelita would never fall into poverty. Their wealth came not only from trade, but from war itself. Profit wrung from prisoners, sold as commodities in a brutal system that had funded the family for generations. Peace rotted the empire's dirtiest fortunes first. With the war over, the pipelines that fed House Nobelita ran dry. Remembering the emperor's smooth betrayal, the same man who once pocketed blood money now urging him to make his dealings respectable. Respectable had ruined him. Every clean venture collapsed. Every attempt to step into the the light ended in loss and humiliation. A Nobelita survived the only way a Nobelita ever had. Sebastian spoke carefully behind him, bringing up Erencia. The Duke turned, eyes sharp with warning. She was distracted with her romance. She would know nothing. This was the perfect window. He ordered contact with Godora. Far from the capital, the criminal city breathed in shadows. Inside a cavernous Gothic hall, a red-haired man with an eye patch lounged across a throne, lazily twirling scissors between his fingers. A servant rushed in with news from House Nobelita. The man's smirk deepened. The old fox was moving again. A maid staggered in under a pile of invitations that had arrived in a single week. Social season had turned into a siege. Erencia, already drained, waved them off, until the maid nervously presented one sealed with imperial wax. A tea party at the palace. From the Empress. Fatigue sharpened into suspicion. Another move on the board. Later, at the Grethelos estate, a silver-haired attendant led her inside. In the drawing room, Euclid stood over a sweating newspaper president, pressing him to retract an article. The man insisted the story was being pushed from the palace itself and had spread beyond control. Erencia stepped in, reading the tension instantly. Euclid tried to downplay it, his expression failed him. She asked about his progress on their separate plans. He dismissed the others, voice low once they were alone. He circled back to her talk of leaving home and the money she had borrowed. Then he crossed a line that made her blink. If she truly meant to leave, she could stay here. The offer landed heavier than he seemed to realize. A servant announced the carriage. No time for explanations. She was coming with him for the day. He took her hand, already thinking 3 steps ahead. She wondered how long he had been planning around her. They arrived at the arena mid-jewel. From the VIP box, the roar of the crowd rolled like thunder. Blood hit sand. Euclid noted fresh scandals rippling through society. Erencia connected the dots. The Empress had grown more aggressive. The tea invitation was bait. She wanted to see Erencia flinch. Another strike landed below. The crowd howled. Erencia's face paled despite herself. Euclid noticed immediately, attention snapping from the fight to her. He offered to leave. She steadied her voice, unwilling to look weak. A familiar socialite approached. Madame Bovary, the capital's loudest whisper network. Erencia greeted her smoothly. Euclid understood at once what this sighting meant. By nightfall, the city would believe they were inseparable. The woman drifted off, delighted, already carrying the story outward. Euclid checked on Erencia again. This time she admitted it. The noise, the violence, the press of bodies scraped at her nerves. For a moment, his composure slipped. He wondered if she resented him for bringing her. The vulnerability startled her more than the arena had. He recovered quickly and chose her comfort over optics. They left. In the carriage, she asked where they were headed. The Grethelos estate. He gently returned to the idea of her staying there and offered more. His carriage, his attendance, full backing when she attended the Empress's tea. A public show of support the Empress would hate. That Erencia liked. At the estate, a servant escorted her to an opulent guest suite overflowing with gowns and jewels. Agnes nearly vibrated with awe. Erencia slipped back into her villainous role with ease, criticizing the lack of preparation and demanding a full staff meeting at dawn. If she was going to stay, she would establish fear first. Anticipation sparked in her eyes. Conflict meant control. Elsewhere in the manor, Euclid's aide hurried in with a newspaper. He had already seen it. A large photo showed him and Erencia together from behind. Intimate, unmistakable. In the corridors, servants whispered about the noble lady who had moved in. Morning broke sharp at the Grethelos estate. Erencia took command of the staff without hesitation. No warm towels, no proper tea, cold water treated like a cure for drunkenness. Her attention snapped to the laundry next, anger rising at dull fabrics and harsh soap. Penny, pinching she made clear, only bred bigger losses. A nervous maid blamed orders from the head maid. Erencia demanded she step forward. An older woman did, rigid and unbending. Erencia dismantled the logic of cheap supplies ruining expensive garments and damaging hands meant to serve. The head maid did not yield. This estate, she insisted, was her responsibility. Erencia was only a guest, not yet the lady of the house. Inside, Erencia thrilled. Open defiance in public. Perfect fuel for a villainous image. She pressed the woman again, mocking politeness wrapped around steel. The room's air shifted. Euclid had arrived. He stood behind them, silent, gaze heavy enough to freeze breath. He repeated the implication calmly. Someone here doubted his chosen partner's future place. No one moved. The dismissal came instantly. Shock flickered across Erencia's face. The staff scattered. Later, in private, she questioned whether that punishment had gone too far. Euclid explained without heat. The woman had been siphoning money from the estate for years. Reports had crossed his desk. He had ignored them out of convenience and old familiarity. Her arrogance today proved that neglect had been a mistake. Erencia absorbed that quietly. The head maid had seemed strict, meticulous. Appearances meant nothing. Agnes soon took over, braiding, pinning, fastening jewels with militant focus. Today was war disguised as tea. Euclid knocked and entered in formal dress. He hesitated, then advised against attending. The Empress had escalated beyond petty jabs. Without him beside her, the risk grew. Erencia brushed it off with confidence, steady and bright. She had long practiced dealing with venom wrapped in silk. He was told to trust her. He still escorted her to the carriage. At the palace, Princess Selverina read the latest articles tying Erencia and Euclid together in dramatic detail, she saw through it all. Manufactured glory, desperate tactics. Her mother's reach was growing louder, not stronger. A servant announced Erencia's arrival. A grand carriage drawn by black horses rolled through the gates. Even before the door opened, presence radiated. Erencia stepped down poised, composed, impossible to ignore. In the garden ahead, the Empress waited. Selvarina watched closely. Back at the Grethelos estate, Duke Novelita arrived in a storm of authority and barely contained rage. He demanded his daughter. Euclid met him coolly, unshaken. She had an engagement today. A meeting would not be possible. A newspaper slammed onto the table between them. The Duke's fury burned hot. Scandal, disgrace, and now this household keeping her close. He declared he would take her back himself. Euclid did not move. His refusal was quiet, absolute, asking whether the Duke truly had nothing more urgent demanding his attention than chasing his daughter's shadow. Euclid suggested the Duke had more urgent fires to put out, something tied to Lord Elber's. Color drained from the Duke's face as the implication struck. Shock flickered, followed by calculation. Euclid ended it there with a thin, cutting smile, making it clear Erencia's matters would be handled without the Duke's involvement. At the Imperial Palace, Erencia endured the tea party between Empress Lilier and Princess Selvarina. The air felt stale, the conversation shallow, every move predictable. The Empress probed and provoked with practiced sweetness while the princess sat quiet, distant, almost lost in thought. The Empress shifted the topic to Selvarina's recent correspondence with Euclid. The princess confirmed it shyly. Details followed, long letters, careful questions about preferences, colors, jewels. Then a scandal sheet appeared, its ink heavy with implication, trying to tie Euclid and the princess together while preaching that an ideal wife should be soft and yielding. Erencia remained composed, boredom sharper than offense, silently scorning the cheap theatrics. Footsteps approached. Prince Barlos entered with easy charm and a voice made for crowded rooms. His attention locked onto Erencia at once, compliments flowing, presence bold. The atmosphere tightened, artificial and suffocating. Erencia rid the board instantly. The Empress was maneuvering pieces, Euclid toward the princess, Erencia toward the prince. A social cage disguised as hospitality. Disgust settled in her chest, heavy and tired. Then another presence cut through the garden. Euclid approached the table without hesitation, ignoring the Empress's visible shock. Calm, direct, purposeful. He announced he had come to bring Erencia back with him. Relief sparked through her, bright and immediate. Before leaving, his attention turned to Selvarina with precise politeness, questioning when they had last truly met and noting that a formal correction would be required to protect her reputation. The move landed cleanly. The rumor collapsed in plain sight. The Empress was left rigid, fury trapped behind royal composure. Inside the carriage, distance finally wrapped around them. Erencia asked where he had come from so suddenly. He admitted he had pushed for an imperial audience that day for one simple reason. He wanted to see her. The confession hung warm and disarming. She fell quiet, caught off guard. He sighed with theatrical defeat, reflecting that wealth, looks, and authority had all failed to sway her. The challenge in his eyes carried more admiration than complaint. Later at the Grethelos estate, Erencia sat with the newspapers spread before her, scanning every line. Agnons hovered nearby, eyes shining with misplaced sorrow, convinced her mistress was silently enduring heartbreak. Erencia's mind, however, moved elsewhere, fast and sharp. A decision clicked into place. She rose abruptly and hurried out, leaving Agnon startled behind. She pushed into Euclid's office with energy that filled the room, a grin edged with intent. It was time to return home. At the Novelita mansion, rage ruled the study. Duke Novelita listened as Sebastian reported that the woman entangled with Lord Elbers was a distant relative of Empress Lilier. The Duke's fury deepened, turning cold and dangerous. Erencia was safe under Grethelos' protection when she should have been ruined. The plan had failed. A new one began forming immediately. He ordered the carriage prepared. If the board had changed, he would go straight to the Empress and redraw the lines himself. Erencia reviewed her situation with growing frustration. Every scheme meant to brand her a villainess had collapsed. Though hair and title only and still shut out of the family's core secrets, her standing had risen instead of fallen. Society now pointed to her as a young noble driving reform. Even the Empress's open hostility had failed to damage her. The pattern was clear and infuriating. She accepted she needed a new approach. The first step was distance from Euclid. He was sincere, upright, and gentle in a way that made attachment easy. That was exactly why he could not be allowed near the storm gathering around her. At the Grethelos estate, Euclid received word that Erencia had packed and left that afternoon. The news settled heavily. He masked it with a quiet sigh, but the abrupt departure stung. Frederick warned that taking on the Colosseum's internal investigation personally was too much. Euclid brushed it off, yet the truth pressed at him. She rejected every offer of help, so he would force support into the shadows whether she welcomed it or not. He asked about the Novelita family's ties to the Colosseum. They had been uninvolved for a long time. The answer left him caught between relief and disappointment. Back at the Novelita mansion, Agnes rushed in with bright excitement. Other noble houses were trying to scout Novelita maids, praising their skill and discipline. Erencia stared, exhausted, as her so-called harsh training was credited for their excellence. The new maid uniforms had also become a sensation for their comfort and practicality. Her attempt at cheap purchases had somehow turned into proof of thoughtfulness and frugality. Every effort to look cruel or careless twisted shifted into virtue. Drained by another accidental victory, she retreated early for the night. Duke Nobelita returned later and learned Erencia was home. His thoughts drifted to his recent audience with the Empress. She had brushed aside his concerns over a young man's misstep and instead commented on how well Erencia and Prince Barlos had looked together at the tea gathering. The message had been unmistakable. They now shared interests. Standing alone with that memory, the Duke decided the time had come. Erencia would be brought into the family business. A future as crown princess would serve far better than marriage into the Grethelos line. The next morning, Erencia approached her father warily. She expected anger for leaving without notice, but he greeted her with unsettling calm. He told her it was time she learned about the family business. Then he revealed they would travel to Godora the following day, and she would accompany him. The name struck hard. Godora, once praised as land blessed by the gods, now infamous for lawlessness and crime. Godora's history carried a bitter lesson. It had once been a peaceful land praised as blessed by the gods. That peace shattered when a former emperor made a reckless decree that criminals in Godora would no longer be arrested, convinced they would repent on their own. Instead, the city became a sanctuary for crime. Outlaws flooded in. What had been a holy land decayed into the empire's criminal heart. Erencia and Ags arrived before the towering iron gates lined with jagged spikes. The air felt heavy, hostile. Agnes could not hide her fear, her steps hesitant as the gates slowly groaned open. Erencia did not waver. Her expression stayed cold, composed, already prepared for whatever waited inside. A man with vivid red hair and an eye patch approached with lazy confidence, scissors spinning between his fingers. Razel. His gaze sharpened with interest as he recognized the Duke of Nobelita and noted how long it had been since their last meeting. Then he noticed Erencia. The Duke made it clear she was the one who would inherit his work from now on. Razel leaned in slightly, testing boundaries. Erencia met his gaze without flinching, her eyes flat and unimpressed, silently demanding proper conduct. He shifted instantly, bowing with exaggerated politeness, presenting himself as a mere businessman of the city and smoothing over his earlier behavior with practiced charm. Erencia dismissed the act just as smoothly, making it clear she expected better. Razel accepted without resistance, amusement flickering beneath his manners. A pulse of purple magic burst from his hand, unlocking the massive inner doors with theatrical ease. Erencia watched carefully, trying to determine whether the power came from him or a magical tool. Razel formally welcomed the Duke and Erencia to Godora, voice smooth, posture respectful. It felt staged, like a calculated display of authority. Erencia recognized it for what it was and refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. He ordered his subordinates to escort the important guests to their rooms. As they moved inside, a purple-haired man observing from the shadows stiffened in recognition. He knew that face. Realization hit hard. Euclid had to be informed immediately. Far away at the Grethelos estate, frustration boiled over. Frederick slammed his hands on Euclid's desk, furious at the humiliating treatment they were receiving from Emir Baron's house while trying to investigate the arena. Euclid remained composed, telling him to calm himself before asking about Erencia. The answer unsettled him. She had not returned home. The only information was that she had left on some kind of business. Frederick added the rumors quietly. Nobelita finances were failing, and there were whispers about them reuniting an old crew from Godora. The name changed the air in the room. Before Euclid could process it, an urgent report arrived from an undercover agent. Erencia was currently in Godora. Euclid rose to his feet instantly. A heavy sense of dread settled in his chest. Back in Godora, Razel poured a drink with casual ease and shifted the conversation toward Erencia's connection to Euclid, speaking as if he knew him personally, but not fondly. The implication lingered. In Erencia's memory, Euclid's earlier unease resurfaced, his quiet worry that she might cross paths with a certain man. Razel's attention returned to the Duke. Business came first. The Duke confirmed he wanted to resume their partnership and had already secured a location. Razel agreed smoothly, noting how rare it was to find a broker as capable as Nobelita. Their glasses met in a quiet toast to the renewed arrangement. The focus turned to the first product. It had to be high quality. Erencia stood there, listening, watching, the disgust settling deep in her stomach. The truth became impossible to ignore. Razel was not just a criminal contact. He was the one holding Godora together from the shadows, far younger than someone in that position should be. And somehow, he shared a past with Euclid. A servant rushed into the hall in visible panic and reported that intruders had breached the building. Razel, who had been entertaining important guests, reacted with irritation that only 3 people had caused such chaos. The servant, shaken, admitted they had been too strong to stop. Tension spiked when Euclid Grethelos stepped into the hall. Erencia, her father, and Agnes froze in shock at the sight of him standing in the heart of Godora. None of them had expected him to appear there. Euclid and Razel moved to confront each other, but the heavy atmosphere fractured almost immediately. Instead of clashing, they bickered over the proper signal to begin their duel. Their argument dragged on, each refusing to concede the point. Erencia, stuck between them holding the signal flag, felt her patience snap. Frustration boiled over as she finally forced the duel to begin. The fight erupted with explosive force. Both men moved at blinding speed, blades colliding again and again. Sparks scattered across the patterned floor as the crowd watched in stunned silence. The clash was intense, precise, and overwhelming. Euclid gradually took control of the battle. With a decisive move, he disarmed Razel and drove him back, his blade stopping at the underworld leader's throat. The outcome was clear. Erencia, still tense from the spectacle, formally declared Euclid the victor. Razel accepted defeat with a crooked grin, complimenting Euclid while still managing to needle him. Their exchange carried the weight of long familiarity. Watching them, Erencia felt a growing suspicion that their hostility hid a shared past. Riesel's gaze slid toward Erencia as he hinted he might have found Euclid's weakness. Euclid reacted instantly, grabbing him with sudden aggression. Riesel only laughed it off, brushing the moment aside as a joke, but the tension lingered. As Erencia prepared to leave, Euclid stopped Riesel and calmly made a shocking offer. He promised to pay 10 times whatever Duke Nobelita had offered if Riesel cancelled his agreement with the Nobelita family. The hall fell into uproar. Erencia stared in disbelief at Euclid interfering so directly. Duke Nobelita's fury exploded as he reminded Riesel of their long criminal partnership. Euclid dismissed it coldly, implying Riesel should choose a stronger ally instead. Riesel found the situation amusing. He turned to Erencia and leaned into her space, asking for her opinion. Caught off guard, she could only stare, overwhelmed by how quickly everything had spiraled beyond her control. The next morning, Erencia woke in an extravagant bedroom. Still groggy, she reflected on Euclid's sharp business maneuver and how completely he had overturned her father's plans. Memories from the night before surfaced. Euclid had insisted they stay at an inn he owned, which turned out to be a grand mansion. Duke Nobelita had initially refused out of pride, unwilling to accept Grethelos' hospitality. But Euclid's quiet pressure and faintly mocking composure had worn him down. In the end, the Duke had no choice but to stay the night under Euclid's roof. Agnes knocked softly and entered, relieved to see Erencia awake. She showed the clothes Euclid had prepared for them, grateful since they had not packed for an overnight stay. She complained about the Duke, frustrated he had not warned them about the exhausting 2-day round trip to Ghidorah. While Agnes vented, Erencia stood by the window, unease settling in as she questioned how Euclid had traveled from the capital so quickly. In a quiet corridor, Euclid met a teal-haired man who had just arrived by teleportation. The man, the Vice Tower Master, teased him about how things had gone in Ghidorah. Euclid remained distant and warned him not to use magic so openly where the magic tower might detect it. The mage grumbled about Euclid's coldness despite their long acquaintance, but brightened the moment Euclid handed him a heavy pouch of gold to ensure his discretion. The mage asked why Euclid avoided the magic tower so strongly. Euclid answered that he did not want any more unnecessary attention. The Vice Tower Master laughed and warned that the old Tower Master would never stop pursuing him, mockingly calling him a genius mage. Euclid ignored the remark, expression hard as his thoughts moved ahead. Outside the mansion, Euclid confronted Erencia and demanded she choose between going with him willingly to the Grethelos estate or being taken there by force. Anger flared in her as she pointed out that returning to her own home was not even offered as an option. Euclid replied that he would not send his fiancée somewhere dangerous. Erencia insisted her family had never actually harmed her, but Euclid did not look convinced. He was not surprised that she defended them, yet he refused to step aside. When Erencia assumed she was free to leave now that the business deal had been cancelled, he stopped her again. He listed one reason after another: possible summons from the Empress, servants already expecting her, the disorder left after dismissing the head maid. At last he admitted his estate had lacked a lady of the house for more than 20 years and that he needed her there. The blunt confession left Erencia silent, caught off guard by the rare glimpse of vulnerability. At the Nobelita estate, Duke Nobelita returned in a storm of fury. He barked orders at Sebastian to bring his sons Elbers and Evan to him immediately. The butler watched him pass, realizing something must have gone terribly wrong in Ghidorah since Erencia had not returned with him. He sent servants running to fetch the young masters from their separate locations, unease heavy in his chest. Back in Ghidorah, Riesel gazed over the city and announced that they would relocate their operations to the capital. His subordinates eagerly offered to steal anything he required, even from the imperial palace. Riesel dismissed their confidence, warning that Euclid, whom he likened to a guard dog, was not an easy opponent. Still, a dark smile touched his face as he imagined the chaos their move would bring.